Wow, Mario Kart World may be even bigger than we thought. Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking even more about Mario Kart World. Yes, I am still under the weather, that is why I sounded weird all week, but there is so much to discuss about this game, I really want to get into it. There have been some different things that have come up over the last few days that I find to be very interesting about Mario Kart World. But I also want to dive even further into the conversation we've had about just how big this game may truly be. It seems like Nintendo's actually holding back a lot for this game, and they're likely going to show us a lot of that during the Mario Kart World Direct next week. And so with all of that considered, my hype, my excitement for this game continues to grow, and I can't wait for June 5th when the Switch 2 launches with Mario Kart World. On that note though, I will mention I am aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the time the Switch 2 launches on June 5th, so if you find yourself enjoying my content, I would appreciate your subscription and hitting of that notification bell. But let's get into it. So Sam Rutherford from Engadget put out their own hands-on experience for Mario Kart World, and they said something very interesting about this game. I also need to call out that Mario Kart World has a 120 FPS mode, and it's damn good. So I find that part to be very, very interesting, that they got to experience a 120 FPS mode of this game. And as far as I'm aware, the only other 120 FPS game on Switch 2 is Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. So the idea that Mario Kart World, this open world game, with all these characters with rather intricate facial expressions, destructible environments, so much going on, 24 racers at a time with all these different creatures doing their own different things, and it can be running at 120 frames per second, that sounds impressive to me. So perhaps, similar to how they detailed two different versions of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, or technically 4 if you account for handheld mode as well, they will also talk about the different ways we can play or experience Mario Kart World during the Direct next week. Moving on to the next little bit of interesting news here, I saw this very cool clip from this French account Mario Kart Actu, and what they said here in French, as I translate it, transformation by Kamek into Pianta and summoning Boom Boom. So as we see here in the footage, Kamek is transforming you into a Pianta, but notice the exclamation point. I think this is actually kind of a big deal, the exclamation point, because I think this pretty much tells us that this moment right here, when Kamek transforms you into Pianta, is you unlocking Pianta for the very first time. So Kamek can cause first time transformations which will unlock characters. That's my interpretation of what's going on there. But also notice how you just got pummeled by a giant Boom Boom. So another thing we've seen from Kamek, or we believe we've seen, is that Kamek causes not just transformations, but also summoning of different enemies as well. Basically, Kamek just causes a whole bunch of havoc, and here we have a giant Boom Boom slamming people down the middle of the stage, or the track. And so Kamek actually is going to be a very interesting item, I believe. But let's now dive into the conversation about Mario Kart World being even bigger than we thought, perhaps with a 120 FPS mode, perhaps with Kamek causing all sorts of havoc, transformations, crazy summonings of giant different Mario enemies. We have these quotes from Bill Trinen in an interview from IGN that I find to be very interesting. Mario Kart World, I think especially as you see from the Nintendo Direct, not to give you any hints or anything, but I did read your article this morning, and I think you had mentioned that you didn't find a lot to discover when roaming around. So I would say tune in to our Mario Kart Direct to see what maybe you'll be able to find out about that. But honestly, this is a game that is so big and so vast, you will find so many little things in it to discover. And there's still some other secrets remaining that I think as people end up buying and playing the game, they're going to find this to be probably the richest Mario Kart experience they've ever had. And so, taking everything he's saying at face value sounds amazing. But what I'm really wondering about is how he's teasing more for us to learn about in the Mario Kart World Direct. And I'm also reminded of what we heard during the treehouse as well.
Oh yeah, look out in the distance there.
Whoa!
Yeah, that's really neat. And once again, there's more to free roam mode than we're talking about here.
Yes.
So please stay tuned
Absolutely.
for the dedicated Mario Kart Direct that's going to be coming up in a few weeks.
And so we have different Nintendo representatives teasing a lot more content with free roam mode in Mario Kart World. We have seen that there are different things you can collect throughout the open world. There are these special coins, there are the item blocks, there are these different switches you can press. But what do those do? Do they have any value beyond just, oh, I collected it? Like, if we're going to be pressing the switches, what sort of changes do they cause to the environment or the game? These switches we've seen in prior Mario games, and they would lead to something, so I'm very curious on what they might be doing in Mario Kart World. And a lot of people have been speculating that perhaps free roam mode could have some sort of story mode involved. I don't know if story mode would be involved directly with free roam, but I do think that this game has got to be bigger than any other prior Mario Kart game by a substantial margin. This game is expensive. It's the most expensive Mario Kart game to date. It's the most expensive non-special edition Nintendo game that we've seen in a very long time. And so with the Mario Kart World Direct, Nintendo really needs to sell people on this game and show that there's a very strong value proposition here. But I got myself wondering even more so about what they could be doing with this game. And something I've touched on before is them revisiting battle mode. There's always a battle mode in Mario Kart, so why would it not be in this game, right? But my recent thought is, what if it's changed? What if battle mode is a massive experience that happens on the open world? Imagine almost like a Fortnite-style version of battle mode where people are getting knocked out. Maybe they can even go beyond the typical 24 characters. What if it's teams of 24? As you have all these teams duking it out with each other, and you're sort of working towards the middle of the map. It doesn't necessarily have to work like Fortnite, it doesn't necessarily have to be 96 characters, but the idea of battle mode being done differently, taking place within the open world, I think there's got to be something to that. I don't think it's just going to be the typical arena-based gameplay we've seen in prior games. So how might they be changing around battle mode? Considering what they do with Knockout Tour, how as you progress, more and more characters get eliminated, I really like that style of gameplay, and I think it could also work really well in battle mode, but it would have to be done differently. Which is why a Fortnite style of the map diminishing as the game progresses comes to mind. But maybe there's more than one way they can do that. Maybe it's not a storm that closes in on you, maybe it's a great flood. Maybe it's not even so much the map closing out, but there are different enemies that are trying to capture you, and you have to run away to escape them. And so there's different styles of gameplay they could implement into battle mode. Perhaps you could set traps in battle mode, so other people can get trapped and be attacked by enemies that are chasing everyone around. There's a variety of very interesting possibilities here. But coming back to the idea of there being a story mode, I can actually see it a little bit, at least from the perspective of there at least being boss fights, which we've seen in some Mario Kart games before. And the reason I can see it more now is, one, we've seen a lot of larger enemies. We just talked about Boom Boom before, we had the giant middle Kong. There are a whole bunch of very interesting larger enemies we've seen throughout the open world. And so perhaps these enemies can be repurposed into actual boss fights during certain occasions in the story or in mission mode. Certainly possible. But I think it becomes more interesting when I think about the mechanics of this game. Because we've seen with this game, you have the ability to jump sideways onto rails and onto the wall, and do multiple tricks in the air. These are mechanics that weren't in prior Mario Kart games, and with mechanics like these, you might be able to use those abilities in different ways to fight different bosses. Like, imagine you doing tricks in the air as a way to reflect projectiles, for example. Or jumping sideways or back to back on walls could be ways to dodge or get to the side of a boss and then bonk them when you flip off of the rail or the wall that you're grinding on. Now, as I continue to think about the implications of what this open world environment can mean for battle mode, I'm coming to realize that the open world will have implications for other parts of Mario Kart as well. For example, time trial mode. How will that work? Will it return? Time trials have always been a big staple for the Mario Kart games. It's something I've always really liked, and I've always thought it's the best way to get good at the game. Do time trials, really learn how to race through these different circuits with speed. But in order to do that, you are going to need these circuits to be closed. So is there a way to do that? Is there maybe possibly also a classic Grand Prix mode so we can enjoy Grand Prix in the normal way and not be forced to do it as it functions in Mario Kart World, where the first part of every Grand Prix you have your typical 3 laps for the first track, but then the rest of the tracks, it's not like that. It works more like Mount Wario, for example, where it's one continuous evolving track, which is cool, but I want both. So is that possible? I would hope that we would get some confirmation of that during the Mario Kart World Direct. But then I also consider the possibility of there maybe being other modes that we haven't seen before, new modes, not just revisiting old ones. And so what if there's like a hide and seek mode, for example, within the open environment? If you have all these different players that can be playing at a time online, then there's a lot of potential there. And maybe it's not so much hide and seek, but more like tag, which might be some kind of an evolution of battle mode, could be. But the point is, I think with this giant world that we have for Mario Kart now, there's a lot that can be treated differently. And so I just have even more questions as to what's going to happen with Mario Kart World. But what do you think they are holding back on this game that warrants the price tag, that warrants this being Mario Kart World, this massive game? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.